It's not just land. It's your identity. A land that was taken by force, and when its people resisted, they were shot, burned out of their homes, and made refugees in their own homeland. Let's understand how it happened. When World War I ended, the Ottoman Empire collapsed, and suddenly your homeland, Palestine, became a prize for the global powers to divide. Britain took control not to protect the Palestine people, but to expand its empire. Palestine fell under British rule through what was called the Mandate system. But Britain didn't just pick up Palestine at random. It was a strategic location close to the Suez Canal, the gateway to India, and controlling it meant to controlling the Middle East. But it wasn't just about land and strategy. At the same time, a political movement was rising in Europe, Zionism, which called a homeland for the Jewish people. Here is an important truth. Not all Jews supported Zionism. Many were happy to live as equal citizens in their home countries. Others, especially religious Jews, rejected the ideas of creating a Jewish state before the arrival of Messiah. But Zionist leaders were determined, and while they considered places like Uganda and Argentina, their eyes were always on Palestine. But why? Because of Jerusalem, the Temple Mount, the stories of prophets and kings. They did not just wanted any land, they wanted this Palestine land. For the British, this worked perfectly. They needed allies in region and were looking for ways to tighten their grip on the Middle East. And so, in 1917, Britain made a deal, issuing a Balfour Declaration supporting a national home for Jewish people in Palestine. But there was one problem. Palestine was not empty. Over 90% of the population were Arab Palestinians, mostly Muslims and Christians. They had lived there for centuries, farming the land, raising families, and preserving deep cultural heritage. And now a new population was being invaded. Zionist immigration began first slowly, then in waves. European Jews, many fleeing real persecutions in Europe, arrived in increasing numbers. Some bought land, others simply just forcefully took it. And when Palestinians resisted this forced change, the British did not protect them. Instead, they armed the Zionist militias and crushed Palestinian revolts. This wasn't a mistake, it was a strategy. The Zionist settlers movement had found cover under a global empire. Palestine wasn't chosen because it was weak. It was chosen because it could be conquered, it could be taken, and its people had no army, no allies, and no one to speak for them on the world stage. Now, let's fast forward to 1947. The United Nations stepped in, not to give freedom to the Palestine, but to divide it. They gave more than 55% of your land to Zionist minority, even though they were only 1/3 of the population and owned less than 7% of the land. And when you say no, this is our home, they call you the aggressor and they call you obstacle to peace. This is not just a story. This is history. This is Palestine. In 1948, after Zionist leaders declared the creation of Israel, neighboring Arab armies entered, trying to defend what was left of Palestine, but the Zionist militias were already armed, trained, and backed by global power. Many had fought in World War II, some trained by the British themselves, and the result? A catastrophe. Palestinians call it Nakba, a catastrophe. And it was exactly that. In just a few months, more than 750,000 Palestinians were expelled or fled in terror. Over 500 villages were wiped off the map. Families were forced to leave at gunpoint, some massacred if they did not. One of the most brutal moments, Dar Yassin, a peaceful village where over 100 Palestinians, men, women, and children were slaughtered by Zionist militias. The message was clear: leave or die. And while the world stayed silent, Israel did not stop at the 55% the UN gave them. They took 77% of the land. They did not build their home on the empty ground, they built it over the remains of someone else's life. The British had packed up and left. The UN stayed silent, and soon the United States stepped in, not to stop the ethnic cleansing, but to recognize Israel within minutes of its declaration. And the refugees scattered to camps in Lebanon, Syria, Jordan, and the West Bank, with no right to return to their own homes, which now sat under Israeli flags, guarded by soldiers and filled with settlers. And this right here was the real beginning. Not peace, not coexistence, but occupation, displacement, and a system built on taking, not sharing. You would think after being forced from their homes, after becoming refugees, the Palestinians would be left alone. But history did not stop there. It got worse. In 1967, just 19 years after the Nakba, Israel launched what it called a preemptive strike on Egypt, Syria, and Jordan in what became the Six-Day War. But this wasn't just about defense, it was about territory. In less than a week, Israel did not just defend itself, it seized everything. The West Bank, including East Jerusalem, the Gaza Strip, the Golan Heights, and even the entire Sinai Peninsula from Egypt. Palestine was now fully occupied, every inch of it under military control. Israeli tanks rolled into towns, soldiers patrolled city streets, and flags of a foreign army flew over mosques, churches, markets, and family homes. Palestinians who had held on through the Nakba now became prisoners in their own land. And East Jerusalem, the heart of Palestinians' identity, was swallowed overnight. Israel called it its eternal capital, despite the entire world refusing to recognize that claim. Now, all of historic Palestine was under Israel control. The occupation began. Palestinians became prisoners in their own land. Military checkpoints were everywhere. East Jerusalem, the heart of Palestinian identity, was seized illegally. Israeli settlers, protected by soldiers, began building cities in the West Bank, while Palestinians were denied permits to build home on their own land. In Gaza, Israel controlled the air, the borders, and the sea. Palestinians couldn't leave without permission, couldn't fish more than a few miles out, and couldn't live freely. Gaza became the world's largest open-air prison. Palestinians resisted with protests, petitions, and international appeals. But where is the world? The United Nations condemns but does nothing. The United States funded with billions in military aid. Europe talks peace while selling weapons. When Russia invaded Ukraine, the world called it a war crime. When Israel bombs Gaza, it called it a right. This isn't diplomacy, this is hypocrisy, this is complicity. And today, Palestinians are not only losing their land, they are being erased from the story, branded as a terrorist, blamed for their own suffering. And still, the struggle for the freedom continues. Palestinians are still being killed, still being bombed, still being caged and silenced even today on this very date. They are buried beneath rubble, bleeding behind walls, starving under siege, and the world is still watching as if their lives are worthless, watching until the last Palestinian is erased from the land and from history. But history has a memory. Do not forget. Those who were once persecuted in Europe, hunted, isolated, treated as outsiders, have now built a system doing the same to another people. The very same pain that once marked in their past is now being inflicted in Palestine. This is not security. This is not defense. This is colonialism. This is apartheid. This is erasure.